Freedom Series episode of the Comeback Game podcast. And today I'm joined by Ben Woodward, who's an author and of the best-selling book, The Empowerment Paradox: 7 Vital Virtues to Turn Struggles into Strengths. As a successful entrepreneur and former president of a $100 million company, Ben teaches a critical principle that creating value out of adversity is a non-negotiable. Ben draws on experience from corporate crises, turning personal trauma and rich life experiences into keynote speeches as he fulfills his mission to help people become the best versions of themselves. Ben, this is a topic that's super, super close to my heart, and I've been excited all morning knowing that I'm jumping on this episode with you today. I just want to say a quick welcome to everyone who's watching this, whether it be live or in a recording across the different platforms on the interwebs. Rafi from my team is across the different chat boxes. So please, throughout the next half an hour and 45 minutes, post all your questions, all your comments for myself and Ben, and I'll be sure to get them answered as well. Ben, how you doing today?
Wonderful. I've been looking forward to this meeting as well. So yeah, chomping at the bit to get stuck in.
Yeah, so you're in California?
I am. Yeah, I'm from all over the place though. I'm currently in Southern California, was born in the UK, grew up in New Zealand, and lived in Australia for a couple of years as well. So
outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Citizen of the world.
Yeah, citizen of the world. I love that. So mate, tell me, how does one become a president of a $100 million company? Let's just start there.
In this instance, it came about because I asked. That was the interesting thing. I was currently the managing director, or prior to that position, the managing director of the European region of this business. It operated in 35 countries around the world. And on one particular occasion, the CEO and president flew over from the States. We had some product launches going on in Europe, and he was coming to participate. And he sat down in my office and he said, Ben, I just need to give you a heads up that the chairman's retiring and he's going to elevate me to chairman and CEO. We're going to need to find a new president. You're going to get a new boss. And I just said, I'll do that. I'll be the president. And he goes, wait a sec, you'd have to move to California. I said, I don't mind doing that. If my wife's good with that, we can do it. We ended up carrying that conversation on. We flew to Norway, where our first meeting was. And in between our speaking assignments on stage at the product launches, we hit the streets of Oslo and walked probably every street you can imagine over the course of a couple of days, just pulling the business apart, putting it back together again. And there was no formal interview in that process. It was just, I asked, we challenged each other, we asked each other a lot of questions, and then we settled very quickly. And next thing you know, we relocated. And it was a great lesson. If you want something, you've got to ask for it and you've got to go after it.
Absolutely. And I can imagine too that you don't get to a position of being a president of a $100 million company without overcoming some significant challenges and some significant adversities. And, you know, I feel this is a topic that's very close to a lot of people's hearts, particularly entrepreneurs and business owners, because, you know, let's be honest, it's been a pretty rough year for a lot of people. You know, some were certainly more prepared than others and have managed to see tremendous growth and opportunity out of 2020. And yet so many weren't prepared for this because I guess, you know, working with a lot of business owners, I just see that they lack some fundamentals within their business. And it's not until something like COVID comes around or a global financial crisis that they realize that there's a lot of holes in their business, a lot of gaps in their process, and it really causes innovation. But tell me about you, like, what have been some of the big challenges and adversities that you've had to face and overcome to obviously, you know, climb essentially the corporate ladder and be where you are today, which is an authority and expert in that space?
Well, there was a fundamental experience that occurred to me early on, or happened to me, I should say, early on in my career. I was the general manager of 2 international markets for a multi-billion-dollar organization. And I was young. I was in my late 20s. I thought, this is fantastic to be in a spot like this at such an early age. I was loving it. You know, and there were promotions pending and there was growth happening in the markets and we were full of life. And it was the beginning of the year, January. You know, we've got our annual plan and strategy all ready to go, ready to launch, because that's all built in, as you know, in the previous months of the prior year. So we're ready to launch. We're excited. I'm at a global comms conference in Germany at our European headquarters, and I get a phone call from our external affairs manager, and she's in a panic. And she goes, Ben, stop what you're doing. You've got to get back to the UK tonight. And I was like, what's going on? She said, we've got government representatives from the Department of Trade and Industry. That's the equivalent of the FTC, perhaps. It's a consumer protection division. They're knocking at our door and they're showing us these pieces of paper here that demonstrate they've got the right to investigate everything they want. Their goal is to shut us down. Their goal is to shut us down. And this paper that they've got says that they can ask for any piece of information that they want. We're obliged to give it to them. And over the course of 12 months, we went through this horrendous ordeal. As you can imagine, in that moment, all of the plans for that year, all of our strategies just got squished. Yeah. We had forensic accountants that came in from the government and took up camp in our office. I'd heard of forensic scientists. If you watch CSI and shows like that, you know what a forensic scientist is, but a forensic accountant.
Yeah.
These guys come in and they are sharp and they are intelligent and they got to know the business real fast. And they went through every ounce of detail in our business over the last 5 years that they could gather. They had no reason to tell us. They said, we're not obliged to tell you why we want to shut you down. We're just going to. That's our agenda. And they had a success rate in court. I think it was about 93% success rate of shutting companies down. And that was an intense scenario. I'm pleased to say through that process, over the course of that 12 months, we fought and defended fiercely what they misunderstood, what they got wrong about our business. Some things we had to eat some humble pie and say, we've got to change. We've got some things that we're doing that we could improve on. And what we'd done is mistakenly accepted what was an industry norm was just okay. Yeah. And the reality was this was a chance to really root out some bad stuff and get things better, which we did. So we transformed the stuff that needed to change, reinvented the business coming out the other side, and went to court, won the court case, and really set a standard for transformation and change in our industry, which I feel very proud of. That particular scenario was very, very instructive. I think I went through 10 years worth of experience in that 12 months alone. And it's taught me, in business, we're always going into or coming out of a crisis. Yeah. And if you're smiling, I know what's around the corner for you. There's going to be something happen. And there are times where we feel in control, and then there are times where we don't. Where something happens to us outside of our control. And that's been something that I've really learned, that in business, we often want to be in control, especially if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner. Your assumption is, now I'm in the driver's seat. Now I'm in total control. We're not in total control. We have influence, but we're not in total control. And COVID this year has proved that.
Yeah, perfect example. And there's a lot in what you just shared there. A couple of things. First and foremost, just to point out, like the obvious, that you guys became the 7%, the 7% that eluded or moved through what was a pretty phenomenal record from these guys shutting companies down. But there's a few things that you said there that I took from that. Number one is that you ate humble pie and you took accountability for, like you fought. Number one, you fought for what you believed in. Number two, you took accountability for the areas within the business that were not where they needed to be or how they needed to be, but they were the way they were because you guys had played on industry standards. And I think that, looking past that, this is the way that many people operate their life. Many people operate their life, without even questioning the unconscious biases, without even questioning the social norms that come along until crisis, until adversity, until something comes along and kind of knocks us off our perch, that we're then forced to reevaluate our life and go, okay, is this, do I still believe this to be true, or is it something else? I think that's a big trap that a lot of us can get caught up in, unfortunately, is that we just go along in life believing our own biases, believing the belief, the belief systems and the patterning we've been created with, without questioning, well, hang on, like, is there something else other than the way I'm showing up right now? Is there something else other than the way that I'm going about my life right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I a number of years back, I sat on the CEO Council for the European Trade Association for my industry. And as I attended my first meeting with them, I thought this would be interesting because my company was relatively small in comparison to some of the CEOs that sat on that board that represented billion-dollar empires, or multi-billion-dollar empires. And so as I sat there, I thought, this is going to be interesting how the power base plays out in a council, because by a CEO council means if we're a council, we should all be equal chairs around that table, but everyone has a very different experience. As we went around the room and made introductions, because there were a few new members there, I found it interesting that what people decided to do was say, my name is, I'm the CEO of, and my company has an annual turnover of, and they just slid in annual turnover, right? And I thought that was interesting because I was sat between two CEOs that represented a $3 and $9 billion business, respectively, right? And here's me representing a very smaller piece of the pie. And but what I noticed throughout the course of the meeting was even people that represented a $250 million company, as they would share their ideas and put their thoughts and convictions forward, they would look to the billion-dollar guys for a nod of approval. Now, what was interesting was I'd worked with one of those guys in one of those companies. So I actually knew from the inside what some of their genuine challenges were versus the marketing facade of what the brand looks like. And I thought, this is a great challenge. Too many of us embrace what other people are doing simply because it's big and bold and brash and wonderful. And we go, I need to do that. It could be inherently wrong.
Well, it's a perception. And one thing we find out time and time again with our members of the Opulence program is the one thing that they say is that regardless of whether they're turning over $250,000 a year or $20 million a year, they're like, shit, these people are just like me. They carry the same burdens, they carry the same challenges, they carry the same problems. Yet, as you said, like often there's this facade of who we are. And social media is a perfect example. Like most people putting forth their highlight reels while we're comparing someone's highlight reel to our behind the scenes.
Exactly. Yeah.
At the end of the day, we are all human. And like, I've never met anybody who hasn't got, so they're not dealing with some problem or challenge or adversity, just some are better at hiding it than others.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. And that's one of the essential qualities that we need in order to overcome our challenges and our adversities is to be humble enough to not self-isolate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got to accept our reality. We've got to, we cannot change our problems, confront them, deal with them, resolve them if we refuse to acknowledge that they exist.
So I love that. It's so true. It's like I said to someone the other day, like, how can you expect to appreciate the life that you're wanting to create with the money and the partner and all the things that are there if you can't first appreciate where you're at now? Like, it doesn't make sense. There's this mentality. It's like, if I get there or when I get there, then I'll be happy. But it's like, happiness is the choice right now. It's not relied upon what we have externally, yet we believe that, which is why so many business owners and so many people in general are unhappy, because they don't know how to appreciate and be grateful for where they're at right now in order to then transform into something greater.
Yeah, exactly. And the word appreciate is a key one. Yeah, its Latin original meaning actually means to give value, to place value. So when we appreciate where we're at, because sometimes where we're at might suck, and it might be really hard where we're at right now. But the task is to first accept that it's our reality, and then to be able to give value to it. Yeah. So if it's suffering that I'm dealing with right now, if I'm struggling right now, can I find value in it? And we can find value through suffering, but also through service. So when we can start to understand the purpose behind what we're experiencing, we can start to give value to it. And when it has value, then it starts to have meaning. And when it's got meaning, then we're empowered to do something about it.
Yeah. I love that. If you just joined us, welcome to the show. I've got on the line here Ben, who I guess is a bit of an expert when it comes to shifting mindset when it comes to a challenge and adversity. And really, I guess his ethos is that there is great meaning and value in adversity. And with meaning comes purpose, with purpose comes fulfillment. We just have to know how to respond to it. And this is such a great episode, Ben, and so I guess needed for where we're at right now. There's a few questions coming in. And what I'd love for you guys to do is just keep the questions coming. I want to touch on something else, and then we'll jump to your questions in a second, but welcome, keep them coming. So I guess, like, Ben, when did you start to realize this? Like, when was that bit of a switch that went off for you where you realized that your thoughts ultimately created reality, and the way that you showed up, it doesn't matter. You don't have to get to $100 million company to shift your mindset. It actually happens much earlier than that. When was it for you?
It was during that crisis that I spoke of earlier, when government representatives knocked on our door, waving these pieces of paper. The challenge that I had there, it forced necessity. I was in charge of an organization where I had staff members coming to me going, are we going to have a business at the end of the year? Am I going to have a job? I'm about to apply for a mortgage. Should I do that? Right. And how do you respond when you don't really know what the outcomes are going to be? All we could do was commit 100% to doing everything in our power to win the case. And with that united commitment, we went forward and we did it. So we had to act as if we were in that place, and we're going to get there, we're going to do it. And we had to get everyone on board with it. That necessity bred it.
I think what you're sharing too, like, is the importance of vision. It's something that I speak about and go into depth in the first chapter of my book, is that, you know, your employees, your staff are looking for a level of certainty. Now, there's one level of certainty, which is like, yes, you'll have a job, but that's something you can't physically give them unless you bullshit them, right? But the certainty you could provide them is, hey, like, we're in the trenches together, and we'll do everything in the power together as a collective to come to the other side, and we'll either rise together or fall together, but either way we're together. And that was enough, and that human spirit to obviously have them hook in and put you guys in a position where you were the 7% that got through and managed to keep your company.
Yeah, exactly. And critically, part of fostering and building that desire, you've got to have strong communication. It's got to be up and down. It goes both ways. You got to get feedback from them, and it's got to be two ways, 100%. But building that vision and is really based on having strong desires. There's the challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs that are starting out, that I've worked with, is they'll have a vision of what they want to achieve, but they lack a matching desire to achieve it. Does that make sense?
100%. I'm just reflecting back. I used to have a mentor who was a billionaire in Perth. He owned a bunch of car yards. And he said to me, he said, Barry, and I'll never forget this, he said, Barry, it's like, the goal should never be the variable. He's like, the variable should be the amount of energy, attention, effort you're willing to put in to achieve the goal. I was like, shit, that makes so much sense. And what I realized is a combination of conversation with him and reading Mark's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, where there's one key phrase that I took from that whole book, which is, are your goals actually your goals? Right. And that's when I realized that what I was chasing in life were goals that I thought would help to make me feel like I belonged or make me feel like I was good enough. They weren't actually goals that were aligned to my heart and to my deepest desire.
And that's interesting, because what you're sharing there is, what's essential to our true growth and prosperity is having a true understanding of who we are. And having that surety and that sure foundation within ourselves that isn't dependent on the validation of others. We need it to a degree, of course. We're human. It's built into our psyche, but we need to get the right balance of that and not be driven by that. That's I was at a meeting in England. I was doing a workshop in Birmingham with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and we were talking about what's your why. You got to have a strong why, because when you've got that compelling why, then you can find out the solutions to your issues, the challenges. You find your how. And this one lady raised her hand. She's at the front of the room, very enthusiastic, very eager. And she said, my why is to share health and well-being with my customers, my clients, because I've recently recovered from a terminal illness, and my sense of value on my health and my life is just through the roof. And her eyes were just sparkling like mad with life and with enthusiasm for her course. And she shared it with a lot of vivaciousness and enthusiasm. And I was like, great, fantastic. And then this lady behind her raised her arms, and she had a bit of a scowl on her face. And she goes, I've got a problem with that statement, right? I said, well, what's your problem? She goes, well, I've never had a terminal illness. She said, I'm not saying I want one, right? And I'm glad that you've recovered. She said, but what I'm saying is, so often we hear people have had these big experiences that give them this overwhelming desire to go out and get it done. I haven't had that. She said, I feel like a big tree with little roots. Right. And I thought that's a really profound statement. And so I asked the audience, I said, how many of you feel like this? And about 80% of the audience raised their hands. I feel like a big tree with little roots. And she said, so what's the answer? I said, well, the answer is really in the metaphor that you used. Yeah, it's a process. If you're a big tree, that big top of the tree is your vision, what you hope and aspire to achieve. But the root system is your desires. And they don't grow in equal measure at equal speed.
No.
You know, we've got to learn to train our desires and not just have lofty vision. We've got to discipline ourselves and recognize that it takes time to craft and discipline and train our intent, our intentions and our desires to be what they want to be. We've got to want the consequences of what we want.
Yeah. Because we're always like, there's always consequences to our actions. This is one thing that I think many people don't understand. Like, there's always consequences to our actions, right? And when we're saying yes to something, we're saying no to something else.
Yeah.
That you're going after, like, are you committed to the process, and are you committed to showing up every single day, even if some days you have to crawl a step forwards to move towards your ultimate vision? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Let's go to a couple of questions. If you are watching live today, welcome. So grateful that you're here. Please keep the questions coming in. We're going to get to them right now. Sean from Adelaide. Hey, Barry. Just keeping in mind the Dr. Moody's podcast. So we had Jeff Moody on before, who's an expert when it comes to burnout. Question for Ben. How does he help his team to distinguish between simple tiredness / disappointment or burnout?
Tiredness and disappointments are on a spectrum, aren't they? And burnout is as well. What we've got is two critical factors. You've got stress and you've got eustress. Okay, the prefix of you means good. Yeah. So we've got good stress, we've got bad stress. Good stress happens when, you know, maybe we're getting ready for a brand new job. If we're in the middle of a crisis, for example, we might be experiencing some tiredness, some big expansion of energy. But if it's turning into stress, then the duration of it starts to stretch out, doesn't it? And the impact of it starts to be more biological. It can lead to serious consequences here and here. So it really comes to taking some time out where you can sit down with your team and help them understand the differences between the two. Recognizing, because it's important to recognize, if you are going through anything in business that is challenging, if it's an uphill scenario, there is going to be stress. That's a part of the journey. So we need to accept it, but at the same time, our task as leaders is not just to help them understand the difference between eustress and stress, but where there are benefits and disadvantages to both, but also be observant ourselves so that we can interject in between, because we should be able to spot ourselves the difference in someone if they're struggling. I had an employee once that was really struggling to achieve a certain task, and he kept on coming back to me and presenting. He was a designer, and he was missing the mark time and time again. And we're like, "You're not getting there. Go back." And I was giving very clear, very specific instructions. At first, when I gave some positive reinforcement and some validation to his progress, he was buoyed up and he experienced eustress. He felt the burn. He stayed up late. He worked some extra hours, and it was good for him. But over time, it turned to stress because he couldn't achieve the target, the standard of excellence. And then all of a sudden, his mood was being impacted in a very different way. We can see it quite organically, I think.
I love that answer. I love that. It's a great question, Sean. Tyler from Sydney. I can imagine how tough 2008 must have been for US businesses. What lessons, not just US businesses, Australia businesses too, although for us, it kind of hit us a couple of years later. What lessons from back then, Ben, did you get more or less prepared for this year's crisis? Like, how did 2008 help you to kind of, I guess, better prepare for what we're going through this year?
It taught me a couple of fundamental lessons. One, again, I referred to this a little bit earlier on. Don't don't overestimate your sense of control.
Mm.
Yeah. But we want to run as fast as we can at our business. And a great friend of mine, shared with me an example from the Grand Prix. He had a friend that was a Grand Prix racer, and he said, this Grand Prix racer said to him, if you feel in complete control of the car, you're not driving fast enough. Right. And that was kind of a cool metaphor for, when you run your business, if you're feeling in complete control, you're not running fast enough. His point there was to be, assertive in your plans, ambitious, and really run at a good pace. But at the same time, what I've learned is there are so many things in this world that we do not have control over. I've been ready for a product launch, and then I've found that there's been a strike at the ports, and I can't get my product that's being imported from another country off the ship. I've got no control over that, right? What do I do, right? And you've got all these kind of different scenarios, and then you've got, of course, government investigations, or you've got a financial crisis, or you've got all these different things that kind of happen. We've got to learn that we're not in control, so we've got to prepare for that, and create some buffers. And one of the essential buffers, especially for small to mid-sized businesses, is cash flow.
Cash, yeah.
Yeah, one of the big issues that tips a lot of businesses up, and especially a lot of entrepreneurs or one-man bands, when a crisis like this hits, is cash flow. Too many people run their business financially like they do their homes. And by that, I mean they run month to month.
Yeah,
and if we
at best, most of them day to day, week to week.
Yeah, and there's a lot of big companies that have been affected because of that same problem.
Yeah,
they go, oh, we've got great reputation, so we're fine. And then this hits, and then you've got
great reputation, market domination. Look at Virgin Airlines in Australia. Like, it took them all about 2 seconds to go bankrupt.
Exactly. Yeah, because they let things like that just get the better of them. So don't ever be too big for your britches. And and when things are going good, save up for a rainy day. Yeah.
Great response. And I guess for me too, like, I'll input as well. Like, I went through, in Australia, it was more like 2011, 2012. I went bankrupt, 2012. It wasn't specifically because of cash issues and things like that. There's a lot more tied up personally, which I speak about in my book. But one thing I learned for there is, like, I felt that I prepared every day since then for what we're experiencing right now. Like, and two key things I think have got us through this year in a way that we've grown and succeeded and taken market share. And the first one is cash. Like, we buried away cash. We divested all the way through, so that when this happened, we had a war chest there, and we were sweet, which allowed me to provide certainty to my staff. My staff worry about losing jobs. I'm like, we're sweet. Show up, do your job. You've got a job. Like, all's good. And the second thing is that we're quick to act. We didn't wait around waiting for this to blow over. I just saw so many business owners that are like, oh, this will be done in a week's time or a month's time or a year's time, like whatever it is. Like, we were very quick to act, to change our market messaging, to be there for our clients. And we took it very seriously, which, a lot of business owners I saw, and some of our clients included, for the first bit, were like, oh, no, my business has been working. It will keep working. And I'm like, no, the whole business dynamic has changed, and therefore you need to change to adapt to that. So hopefully it gives you a bit of response there, Taylor. Another question from Taylor as well. I'm still young in business, in the business ladder myself. So I'd like to ask again, how does Ben go about helping a young business owner to develop the key mindset?
On a one-on-one basis. That's how it is. I don't think there's a particular formula. In my book, I talk about 7 vital virtues that we need to possess, and they're definitely interrelated. I talk about the necessity of a disciplined heart. I talked about that earlier, training our desires and really focusing on wanting the consequences of what we want. Getting educated, and not taking for granted that you're going to run on good luck or good fortune or just instinct. You got to get smart. And I talk about patience. I talk about how to act when you don't have all the answers, and how to manage that in spite of your education or your learning. I talk about how to let go of the past, so that we aren't anchored to that, because that stops us from being able to move forward. Definitely in line with what you were saying there. When change comes and we're not in charge of that change, we've got to let go of the past so that we can adapt and respond and move forward. So I go through those virtues within my book, but when I'm working with a young entrepreneur, it's got to be on a one-on-one basis. It's because you've got to understand where they're coming from first.
Yeah.
And so it's always about listening first. Who is that person? What are their unique challenges? What is it they're trying to achieve and accomplish? What are their strengths? What's their business model? What's their plan? And I get them doing all the talking first. Yeah. And once I understand all of that, then we know how we can move forward in helping to shape their future and help them to achieve their goals. But it's never wise, in my opinion, to jump in and say, let me tell you what you need to do.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are yet. So let's have that discovery session first.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I agree with what you say. What I'd add to that too, like some basic fundamentals, Tyler, like for me is having a daily routine. You know, like I find personally, like, yes, I agree. There's a lot that we have to do to our mindset from one-on-one basis. Like I thoroughly believe that a business never outgrows its founder. And I honestly believe too, we never have business problems. We have personal problems that get expressed through our business, through the decisions that we make and the things that we attract. But in saying that, you know, having a daily ritual, David Goggins talks about it in his book, you know, Can't Hurt Me, around challenging ourselves and pushing ourselves with exercise and stuff. It's like the way that we show up in life shows up in every area of our life. And if we're not constantly, I guess, having a good self-help routine, how can we expect to just work on our mindset for our business? It comes across in every area of life, in our relationships and our health and our fitness and so forth as well. But yeah, definitely seek out and get some help one-on-one too, because I believe that growing a great business first starts with us and our mind and our heart.
Yeah. Can I just quickly add to that as well? It's we've got to reiterate this principle of daily routine. It's small steps. Often we want to jump in if we're enthusiastic. And I do find that when I was younger, my steps, I wanted to be larger and more robust. And as I've gotten older, I've seen the wisdom in being consistent with steady pacing. And there is a difference there. But that applies definitely to feeding our minds and our hearts. I have been surprised of late how many people have confessed to me recently that they're not really big readers and they don't read much. And it's blown my mind. And what I've noticed is those that are really good readers that read a lot, go further in life. You know, if you want to do well in business as an entrepreneur, you fill your mind up with as many good books as you can. You will never go wrong for feeding your mind.
Yeah.
It's what was it?
Napoleon Hill, was it? Think and Grow Rich. Talked about, like, you know, our net worth is equivalent to our net work. And it's like when you're surrounding yourself with people that, you know, like you said, have written these books or have got your businesses a little bit ahead of us, it's like we start to automatically take on board their beliefs and their mindsets and their way of doing things. It starts to shape who we are and how we see the world.
Yeah. I love what Zig Ziglar said once. He said, some people say that motivation doesn't work or it doesn't last. He says, well, neither does bathing. That's why we do it daily. Yeah. So we just got to do that every day.
So good. Love that. Great question, Tyler. Question from Jim from Tasmania. What is Ben's quick criteria when it's time to make hard and critical business decisions? Good question.
I remove myself from the equation. It's very easy to let your decision-making process get compromised by putting your own needs and your own interests at the front of the process. If it's uncomfortable for me, if that's uneasy, or it's not gonna make me feel good having to do that, then maybe I'm gonna look for other ways. What I do is I've made a commitment front and center as a part of my decision-making process that I will always do what is right, not what is easy.
Love that.
So I take myself out of the equation and make sure that I'm not biased in that process towards my own benefit.
Love that. Love that. So Ben, for those that are watching, listening to this today, the live or on the replay, that might want to find out more about you or grab a copy of your amazing book, what's the best way they can connect with you?
On the website, my website is ben-woodward.com. So nice and easy. And of course, you'll have my social media handles on the website there as well. On Facebook, you can find me on the Empowerment Paradox too. Join the page. That's always good to do. My book is available on Amazon and all the typical places for purchasing books, and it's in Kindle, it's paperback, hardback, and audio as well. So whichever way you want it, we've got it.
Love that. So Ben, a question from me, like if you were to go back and have a conversation with a 10-year-old version of you, knowing what you know now, having been through what you've been through, what advice would you give him?
Hang in there. That would be it. Hang in there. Because there's been so many scenarios and situations that have come my way since I was 10 that I did not expect. Yeah. Just really quickly, I asked an audience, I've asked this a number of times, in a number of different countries. I've said to the audience, by show of hands, for how many of you have found that life has turned out exactly as you planned? No one has ever put their hand up, ever, regardless of country and audience. So life never goes as planned. So my advice would be, hang in there. It turns out better than you think.
Yeah.
So just hang in there.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And look, if you're watching and listening to this today and you are an entrepreneur, business owner, and you'd like to build a purpose-driven, profitable business that can work without you, make sure you get a copy of my book, The Path to Freedom, which you'll see just there, available on all the social channels. We'll put a link below this as well. And also make sure that you subscribe to the Game Changers on Facebook, Instagram, to stay up to date with the latest podcast episodes and live streams. Tomorrow we have Gina Wickman, founder and creator of the EOS system, Traction Rocket Fuel, on the show as well. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. The time's just flown by. Thank you so much for, is it middle of the night for you?
No, I'm on the Pacific time, so it's 9:45 in the evening. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed our chat and trust that everyone who's watched this today has as well too.
Yeah. Thank you very